Hey, welcome to That Guy Talks Movies. I am That Guy Talking Movies, and on this episode, we're going to talk about the Mission Impossible movies, the entire franchise, my ranking of all 6 films so far. I wanted to do this episode for a while now, just talk about the Mission movies and my fondness of the Mission movies and the ones I like more than others and such. And no better time to do it because Mission Impossible, the 7th Mission Impossible in the series, is set to be released in theaters next week on July 12th. So, perfect opportunity to talk about the other Mission movies. But before we get into that, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is if you've not subscribed to my channel, somehow you found your way here through the magic of hashtags and the algorithm and me posting at the right time or whatever other magical forces had to bring you here, subscribe to the channel. I truly appreciate that. It makes a big difference. And to those of you who continue to support me and subscribed already and you watch my videos, shout out to y'all. I appreciate it. Let's get into it. All right, so Mission Impossible, the movies. I'm going to do my list. We're going to start with the worst of the list, and then we're going to go up. So we'll start with the 6th worst film in the franchise as far as I'm concerned, and then we'll move up to my number 1. I'm looking forward to Dead Reckoning. I really am. I'm going to see that on Monday, and I'll try to have a review up on it as soon as I get a chance, and we'll go from there. But let's get into the 6 films that are currently out. Okay, in last place, bottom of the list, probably not a surprise. If anyone knows the Mission Impossible movies, I think it's kind of a unanimous opinion across the board that the second film, Mission Impossible 2, John Woo, MI2, is just the worst in the entire series. It just didn't work. Thandie Newton, the romance element going on here, and the slow motion shots. Nothing against Thandie Newton. It was incredible to watch her in general. She's a beauty on screen. I admire her, but the actual love thing between her and Tom and the slow motion shots of them spinning in the convertibles near death and looking at each other with longing eyes of love while they spin out of control and almost fall off a cliff is just ridiculous. It's just a ridiculous film for so many reasons. There are a few good action pieces here, a few good action sequences. John Woo didn't do a terrible job on some of that. You know, it is what it is, but it's nothing memorable. I've tried to watch that film a few times thinking maybe I would like it, you know, give it more of a chance. And every single time I'm just like scratching my head. You know, Dougray Scott is the bad guy in this, and the whole idea of this pharmaceutical company, you know, the greed behind trying to create a virus and then make a pharmaceutical drug, vaccine or something that will actually make the pharmaceutical company billions of dollars. Wait a minute. Why does that sound so familiar? Anyway, so Mission Impossible 2, bottom of the list, worst of all the films when it comes to Mission Impossible. Okay, so my 5th film in the Mission Impossible ranking would be Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. This is the one directed by Brad Bird. This has them going into the Kremlin, breaking into the Kremlin, Benji and Ethan, and then there's an explosion and the Kremlin is destroyed, or parts of it are destroyed, and there's a terrorist act and it's blamed on the IMF or blamed on Ethan and America. So there's this whole thing there. There's a guy with nuclear codes and they got to find this guy. This is the film that brings in Paula Patton. She's introduced here, and Jeremy Renner is introduced in this film, and it's, you know, Jeremy Renner could have done better. Paula Patton could have done better. She's a beauty to look at on screen, kind of like a Thandie Newton thing. She's eye candy for damn sure. But overall, as a performance and as a character that is like believable and is actually worth watching, nah, not so much. Same thing with Jeremy Renner. I just thought he was not as strong as he could have been in this series. There is obviously the Burj Khalifa building, outside the building scene, which is probably the highlight of the entire film, especially if you saw it in IMAX when it was in the actual theaters. That was probably the best part of the whole thing. Otherwise, overall as a picture, not that great. Not terrible, but not fantastic. Again, I'm not blaming Paula Patton or Jeremy Renner's character on this. I just don't think that overall it was a highlight of a film when it comes to the plot, the storyline. I think they focused on the action a lot, which is what they do with most of the Mission movies after the first one. But I'll get into that when I get to that one. Yeah, it had a memorable action sequence, you know, I thought the building thing was a little absurd, if you ask me. I mean, I just thought that was crazy, some of it. And I guess that's the point here. So Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, number 5 on my list. All right, number 4 for me, Mission Impossible 3, directed by J.J. Abrams. This one I thought was a good action film, especially after coming from Mission Impossible 2. This really set the tone for the action set pieces and for things to really go, you know, buck wild when it comes to delivering these great action sequences. And I think the opening of this and the introduction of the bad guy right away, Philip Seymour Hoffman, the late great Philip Seymour Hoffman, who on screen was one of the best bad guys, villains in the Mission Impossible series. Unfortunately, I think he should have been in the film much more, but it is what it is. This is the mission movie where we see Tom, who's retired from the field, and now he's working as he's a trainer, training IMF agents for the field. So he's kind of trying to back out of that life as an agent, and he's getting married. He's got a woman, a fiance, and the whole nine. So this is an emotional thing here with Ethan Hunt's character, and we get that. But then he gets put back into the IMF on the field, and he's got some mission to deal with as far as the rabbit's foot and Philip Seymour Hoffman's character, the bad guy, and trying to get hold of this thing. And it's a whole back and forth and a lot of action. It's really what it is. I just think that this one was done better than the second one because the action sequences and the way it's directed by J.J. Abrams really they really bring you in. And I thought Philip Seymour Hoffman, I just think he should have been on screen more. But again, from the beginning, the opening, and then the helicopter scene where the field agent Lindsay has the bomb in her head, I thought that was really that was kind of creepy the way she died too. But anyway, I thought Mission Impossible 3 was a good entry into the overall series. Nothing outstanding overall as far as like the whole thing together, but not as bad as the second one. And we'll get to my number one list, but I don't think it was as good as the first one or two. But anyway, we'll get to it. Okay, number 4 on my list, Mission Impossible movie. Should I say number 3? Going backwards. My third favorite film on the list would be Mission Impossible: Rogue Nation. This one is the first one where Chris McQuarrie is involved in that relationship between McQuarrie and Tom Cruise, writing and storytelling, and Chris's direction of what really set the franchise going forward from this point on, in my opinion. This one is setting everything up with the Syndicate, and you've got Solomon Lane, who I think is one of the better, another one of the better bad guys and villains, a recurring villain for the first time in the franchise, and he is absolutely phenomenal. The story here is phenomenal. You got the introduction of Alec Baldwin with the CIA in this film, who eventually comes over to IMF, and Alec Baldwin in every role, especially a role like this, is fantastic. He just adds a certain gravitas and a certain authenticity to these roles, and he just nails it each time. So that combined with the action in this, the actual storyline, Rebecca Ferguson's character, Ilsa Foss being, an MI6 agent being introduced here, and she's one of the better recurring characters that's going to come into the next film as well. And she does a phenomenal job, and she adds to the overall IMF team, not quite because she's not working with or for, but she's her own character. So it's kind of like this. She's just interesting, and it makes for a really good overall film. I think the action scenes here were pretty good overall. So if I didn't mention that previously, I think from the first movie, so from the second movie on, especially starting with 3, most of the Mission Impossible movies became all about the action and those set pieces and those sequences. That's really what it's Cruise's whole thing of bigger, better, badder every summer. Let's make these huge things and do even bigger stunts. And that's really what they became. And this one, it's the same thing, these stunts and him going into the water and having to swim around, and he dies half the time. He dies a couple times. There's a sequence in this where they're in the BMW, him and Benji, and the car flips over like 10 times, like literally flips on its hood and then flips over vertically a few times, and they're fine. They get out and they just walk away. Sometimes it's so ridiculous, but you kind of just have to take it for what it is and just whatever. But overall, I thought Rogue Nation was the start of what's to come, and it definitely didn't disappoint. That brings me to number 2 on my list. My second favorite Mission Impossible movie, Fallout, which I think was overall the most complete, coherent, and everything coalesced just the right way to make a solid spy thriller action film. I think the way it was shot, I think the darkness of it, I think, again, having Solomon Lane and the Syndicate, that whole thing, Rebecca Ferguson in this, the introduction of, what's her name, that plays Max's daughter, the blonde woman, phenomenal. I love the score of this one. I like the overall tone of it. Again, Ethan struggling with his wife, or the separation from his wife, and how that whole thing is affecting his life. You've got the team here, Simon Pegg again as Benji, and you've got Ving Rhames, you've got Luther here. This just works as an overall complete, really engaging film that has story, that has the right script, and it's not so much focused on the action, but the action is phenomenal. There's a couple of sequences. I should say there's one sequence. The helicopter thing at the end for me was a bit ridiculous. I enjoyed most of it, but then it got so silly. I was like, really? Come on. Like, it just, I know they're trying to push the envelope, but for me, as exciting as it was to see in the theater, I just thought it kind of got a little ridiculous. But overall, a solid film, and it's really shocking that almost an impossible mission to have a film be this good six films into the franchise. Like, this is literally the sixth film since 1996, and to be that good at this point, I got to give credit to Chris McQuarrie, because I think, again, that relationship with Chris McQuarrie and Cruise making these films now, because he's doing Dead Reckoning as well. So Rogue Nation, Fallout, just phenomenal. So that's my second favorite on the list. Sometimes it might even be number one for me, but we're going to get into number one. My number one film, let's get into it. All right, number one Mission Impossible movie for me would be the original 1996 Brian De Palma Mission Impossible. This was the film that set the whole thing off. I know it was based on a TV show. I wasn't around for the TV show that was out way back in the day. I was not around for that, but I knew the music, this iconic theme. I saw this movie in the theater 6 times when it came out, 68th Street and Broadway in New York City. And I love this film. I love the action sequence. But more so in this film, it's the story. It's a spy thriller from the opening, with his entire team being offed like right away, with John Voight's character playing Jim Phelps and him sort of being double crossing Ethan, and Ethan being chased by the IMF and Kittredge, and the whole thing. It's a spy thriller. I love the locations in this. I love Prague. I love everything about this film in terms of being a spy thriller. It wasn't so heavy on action. It wasn't about the action. It wasn't, oh, what are we going to get? How much crazier are they going to get? There's a crazy scene, obviously, with the train at the end, but I absolutely love it. When that train thing happens and he's fighting John Voight on the top of the train, and then they go into the tunnel, as ridiculous as that is, with a helicopter going into the tunnel, with Jean Reno flying the helicopter into a tunnel, chasing the train. And then when he does the red light, green light, and sticks the gum onto the glass of the windshield of the helicopter, and then he jumps and the music kicks in. That sequence for me, to this day, I sometimes just put it on just to see that sequence, because I think it was very well done. I love this film. I love Vanessa Redgrave in this film, as Max. And I just think it's a flawless idea of Mission Impossible, of a spy thriller. There's story. There's the whole mystery of what's taking place. Like, how did that happen? What's going on? Who's betraying who? Like, what's going on? I just think it's a great film. I love Mission Impossible. I think that the cinematography in this one, and the shots being Brian De Palma, I think this is some of the best work. Not from an action sequence, again, standpoint. It's not about that. It's more about just the quiet shots, just those Brian De Palma extreme close-ups on a crazy angle when he's talking to Kittredge at the table of that restaurant in Prague. Just fantastic. So Mission Impossible, my favorite of the entire franchise. All right, so that's it for my list. Let me know if you agree with me. Let me know if you think I'm crazy. Let me know what you think is your favorite. I know a lot of people think Fallout is the top one. And surprisingly, the first Mission Impossible doesn't always rank very high for a lot of people. It's usually like second or third on their list, or whatever it is, like, from the bottom. So I don't know. But let me know what you think. I'm looking forward to Dead Reckoning. Like I said, when I see that, I will put a review up for that, and you guys can hear my opinion on it or not, whatever. But I'm going to put a review up for that, and we'll see what happens. I think it's fantastic that a franchise can go this long, like the Bond series, but not quite like the Bond series, because Ethan Hunt versus Bond, Bond it's a whole different thing. I should do a video just comparing Bond and Hunt, and that whole, how we see these franchises and how they stack up against each other. I'm more of a Bond fan, quite frankly, but it is what it is. Anyway, enough for me. Again, if you like this video, hit that like button. I truly appreciate that. If you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button, and I will see you on the next That Guy Talks Movies.